Whether we are at a stage that is the end of this season or not, I'll have that debate till forever. But, well, not till forever. There's an end date to that. But I want to take a look at Leon Draisaitl. I had promised that I would take a look at some careers once the season was potentially done. And right now, why not? We'll take a look at Leon Draisaitl because you still hear people complaining that he doesn't get enough of the attention that he deserves. And the reality is he does get a lot of attention, and it is happening this season for a very good reason. Now, he's drafted number 3 in 2014. Seen as an excellent pick. And I talked about the 2014 draft. I did the redraft the other day. And Draisaitl, if it was redrafted now, would definitely be the number 1 pick. I don't know that it would be close. It would be his draft. Now, the year of his draft, the Oilers decided to keep him around, which was seen as potentially rushing him. He played 37 games, 2 goals, 7 assists, 9 points. He averaged 12 minutes and 42 seconds of ice time, and it was seen as rushing him. And the concern was that the Oilers could be ruining a top prospect. This was something that they were accused of doing in previous instances, and was seen that they were doing it again. Now, the reality was he wasn't really ready. But still, he came back 2015-2016 and proved people wrong. He wasn't going to be a bust. 72 games, 19 goals, 32 assists, 51 points. And his ice time goes up accordingly, 18 minutes and 3 seconds on average. He has become at this stage a pretty good top 6 forward for the Oilers. So while there may be some talk still that he's there kind of by default, that they don't have enough depth, and still you want to gradually bring a guy along, year 3, he kind of silences any critics that may be left on some level, and we'll get to that. 82 games, 29 goals, 48 assists, 77 points. They play in the playoffs that year. He has 13 games in the playoffs, 6 goals, 10 assists, 16 points. During the regular season, he averages 18 minutes and 53 seconds of ice time. And now that he's about a point per game, the narrative becomes he can't hold down his own line as a center. And his face-off percentages were below 50% right now. This season, they're above 50%. And he's done a decent job. But we'll get to that. And I know there's people like, decent job. Just give me a second. I'll get there. 2017-2018, 78 games played, 25 goals, 45 assists, 70 points, 19 minutes, 19 seconds on average with his ice time. So his ice time's going up. Points per game lowers a little bit. But again, when you're going into fantasy hockey, you can go, okay, it's 77 points, then he had 70. Probably a 70, 75 point player, maybe 80. Because people look for that average, and then, all right, here's where we can project this guy's going to be. And he blows it all out of the water. So last season, 2018-2019, 80 games, 50 goals, which is second in the NHL, 55 assists, 105 points, which is fourth overall in the NHL, 22 minutes and 35 seconds of ice time per game. The ice time is insane. The ice time this guy plays as a forward is crazy. That'd be busy for a defenseman. But for a forward, that is an amazing amount of ice time. The Oilers, who do have depth issues at times, they rely on McDavid and Draisaitl a lot. A ton, actually. So, 2019-2020, thus far, or at the end, however you want to see it, 71 games played, 43 goals, which is fourth in the NHL, 67 assists, which is first, 110 points, also first. So 11 less games, 5 more points, and his ice time actually went up a tad. 22 minutes and 37 seconds this year. Again, for a forward, that's a ridiculous amount of ice time. More than a third of the game, he's out there. And more than a third of the game, McDavid's out there. And sometimes they're out there together, and many times they're not now. Because the idea is simple. If you're Edmonton, Draisaitl is legitimately a superstar of his own. So if you can roll McDavid, Draisaitl, and if they can recover and get out there every third shift, so you have one line in between their lines. So maybe you put the third line out, you give their lines another run, put the fourth line out. And I'm talking about when you're behind in a game or it's a tie game and you're looking for that big goal. It's intimidating. And with the emergence of Kyler Yamamoto during the season this year, it's made them that much more dangerous. So 422 games played in Leon's career thus far. 168 goals, 254 assists, 422 points, which means next season he has a good shot at 500 points. He has an excellent chance at 300 assists and 200 goals. We will start talking about pretty big milestones for a young player pretty darn quick here for Draisaitl, who looks like he could be a 100-point player every year, 100 points plus. And over his career, he's averaged 19 minutes and 38 seconds per game. Now, yes, if I was voting today, I would vote for Draisaitl to be the Hart winner. He's going to win the Art Ross, whether we do continue or don't continue this season. And there are other stats to look at here which are impressive. In shootouts, he's 8 for 19. It's not bad. It's almost 50%. Power play goals, 2018-2019, he had 16 of them. He was 6th overall in the NHL. This season, 2019-2020, 16 again. 2nd in the NHL behind Pastrnak. Game-winning goals, he's 1st in the NHL, 2019-2020 with 10. 10 game-winning goals for the Oilers. A lot of stats here that tell you, yeah, he probably wins and definitely wins the Hart Trophy. And maybe the Lindsay as well. I think the Lindsay is still going to be between he and McDavid. And since that's for the best overall player in the NHL, I think players voting would be more likely to vote for McDavid. So shooting percentage is an interesting one. Last year he had a shooting percentage of 21.6%, which was 1st in the NHL. And it was a stat that I looked at and said, that'll probably come down next year. So Draisaitl gets 50 goals. His shooting percentage is 21.6. He's 1st overall. That'll probably come down a bit. And it did. Came down to 19.7, which is 3rd in the NHL. He's still, with 7 goals in his last 11 games, would have got to 50 goals. And potentially still could, probably not, right? But anyways, yeah, so that's possible. I could see him stringing together 7 goals in 11 games because he has been on scoring binges at times during this year where he can score 4 goals here, 3 goals there, 2 goals. So it would have been not easy, but definitely plausible that he beats that career mark of 50 goals from last season. Now, monthly 3-star selections. So these are from the National Hockey League. This year, pretty big year for Draisaitl. October of this season, he's 3rd in the 3 stars. January, he's 2nd, and February, he's 1st. So it really has been an emergence for him, and that's an honor he didn't have before this season. And the weekly 3 stars, he didn't have a weekly 3-star before this season either. February 3rd, he's 1st. February 17th, he's 1st again, so that's 1st star in the entire National Hockey League twice in 3 weeks. March 9th, 3rd. So pretty strong numbers and excellent overall work by Leon Draisaitl to become arguably one of the best players in the National Hockey League. So when people ask, well, do you think the Oilers win a Stanley Cup with Connor McDavid? Yes, because at some point I would think with McDavid and Draisaitl anchoring lines 1 and 2. And the fact that with Draisaitl's numbers, can you argue that's a second line? Look at the ice time. And I know there's also ice time in there from power plays where he's on the ice with McDavid and other things you can dissect, but is it really a second line with Draisaitl on there? Because McDavid and Draisaitl play roughly the same amount of time. And it is crazy to think that these guys are still young, and the potential is still there for him to get better. Maybe we see 130 points from him next year after all, because he was on pace until recently to score 133 points. I think he's currently on pace for 127 if you projected that out over a full 82 games. But is 130 out of reach? No. And I think McDavid can get there as well. We talk a lot about great duos in hockey, and I think we're looking at a situation where these are 2 star players that can score at basically the same rate. So whereas Gretzky had Curry, and Curry was a fantastic goal scorer, they never scored at the same rate points-wise. Lemieux and Jagr were absolutely dynamite, but Lemieux in his prime was a much better scorer than anybody else in the National Hockey League not named Gretzky. With Draisaitl and McDavid, it looks like the potential's there to have 2 guys putting up the same amount of points that could be head and shoulders above the rest of the league. It's an intimidating thing to think about, and it is something that no other team in the league that I can think of can really boast. You have leagues that have really good lines. You have leagues that definitely have superstars that are really good, but you have two guys who could lead the league in scoring 1 and 2 and have them be far above everybody else. That's a more difficult task. That's something that's more difficult to answer, and it's something that as the offseason goes on, I would definitely want to take a look at tremendous duos in history and look at, times when you've had a top 10 in the NHL scoring list dominated by one team, or perhaps two players who rule it. And right now, Draisaitl kind of rules. So, the one question mark we still have with the Draisaitl McDavid era is the playoffs. So we'll see whether or not they make that breakthrough in the playoffs, because if they were to bring a Stanley Cup to a Canadian city, at what point do we start saying, well, that'll get him in the Hall of Fame? I mean, McDavid, we already have that conversation. Draisaitl, we don't, because, again, it's ridiculously early in the guy's career at 420 games. But hey, how many more years is it until we say, no, they probably get in there? And a cup ring would probably make that conversation happen a little bit sooner. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through, just tapping upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.